A real confidence isn't about ego or affirmations. It's about what your brain believes you've earned. You can stand in front of a mirror, repeat 1,000 positive mantras, puff out your chest, wear the best clothes, and still feel like a fraud. Because deep inside, under the surface of appearances and self-talk, your brain is constantly asking one quiet, ruthless question: have we earned this? And if the answer is no, you feel it, not as shame, not always as fear, but as friction, an invisible resistance that makes you hesitate, stall. Absolutely vital. Pull back or second guess yourself in the moments that matter most. When you're about to speak up, when you're about to step forward, when you're about to be seen. That resistance isn't weakness. It's biology. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to dog, protect you from the unknown, from rejection, from risk, and from the threat of failure. But here's the paradox. The more you avoid that resistance, the more it grows. Because confidence, neurologically speaking, is not built in moments of comfort. It's forged under tension, under pressure, in those moments where uncertainty demands action. And when you step into that moment, even if your voice shakes, even if your heart races and your mind whispers doubt, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins to recalibrate what it believes you're capable of. Confidence isn't a performance. It's a memory, a neurobiological memory of effort, earned success, and real feedback. And the more evidence you give your brain through deliberate action, the more it adapts, not just psychologically, but structurally. Confidence isn't a feeling. It's a pattern of signals, cortical maps, dopaminergic responses, vagus nerve modulation, even muscular tone, that together create the internal state we label as belief in self. But if you've struggled with confidence for years, this may feel like a distant concept. Absolutely vital. You might feel like you're wired to doubt, like you missed the genetic lottery. Absolutely vital. But that belief, that confidence is something you either have or don't, is one of the greatest lies you've been told. Because what we call confidence is really a learned capacity to move through uncertainty while regulating your nervous system. That's not a talent. That's a trainable skill. Let's break it down. When you step into a high stress moment, public speaking, a job interview, a confrontation, your nervous system rapidly shifts. The amygdala fires, scanning for social threat. The hypothalamus kicks off a cascade through the HPA axis, flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Heart rate increases. Breathing gets shallow, and your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, self-control, and complex planning, begins to quiet down. This is not a failure. This is a survival response, and it's wired into the most ancient parts of your brain. But here's what's key. Confidence isn't about eliminating that response. It's about becoming skilled at operating within it. The most grounded self-assured people you don't feel no fear. They feel it and move anyway. Why? Because their brain has learned that fear doesn't mean stop. It means pay attention. This is where neuroplasticity comes in. Every time you engage a difficult task, especially when you don't feel ready, and push through to completion, your brain encodes that sequence. Action A, stress, or effort outcome. The basal ganglia begin forming habit loops around courageous behavior. Dopamine is released not just from the reward of success, but from the very act of overcoming resistance. That's key. Dopamine, which fuels motivation, isn't just released when you win. It spikes when you strive, when you lean into challenge. That's the biological core of confidence egg, a system that learns to associate effort with reward, not performance. Effort, because that's what the brain can trust. That's what it remembers. Repeated exposure to challenge, followed by recovery and reflection, gradually rewires your circuits for resilience. But here's the catch. Most people wait to feel confident before they act. They want the emotion before the experience. The nervous system doesn't work that way. Confidence is not a precondition. It's a consequence. If you want to feel different, you have to behave differently first, even if it feels fake, even if your hands tremble, because the brain doesn't care about appearances. It cares about patterns, and patterns change through repetition under real-world tension. This is why trying to fake it often backfires, because when your internal state, your heart rate, breathing, and emotional chemistry is signaling threat and you try to overlay that with positive self-talk, your brain senses the mismatch. It's called interoceptive incongruence. Your internal signals don't match your narrative and your nervous system defaults to caution. But when you train the body first, when you regulate the breath, steady the gaze, slow the exhale, you signal safety from the bottom up. That's how real confidence is built, from the body to the brain, not the other way around. because the nervous system listens to action more than words. So if you want to build confidence, don't start with mindset. Start with behavior. Start with physiology. Start with training your body to handle challenge. Then your brain will follow. And let me be clear, this isn't about being loud or extroverted or dominating. That's not confidence. That's compensation. Real confidence is quiet, stable, and deeply embodied. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove. It simply acts because it knows what it's trained for. If you've ever felt like an imposter, you're not alone. Imposter syndrome is not a flaw. It's a feature of a brain that cares about social belonging and survival, but you can train your way out of it, not by convincing yourself with words, but by stacking evidence in your nervous system. Evidence that you can speak, lead, act, and move forward even when you don't feel ready. That evidence becomes your confidence. And the beautiful part, this isn't about new feelings. It's about becoming functional in the presence of fear. That's the shift. That's the rewiring. That's how you train your brain for real and biological confidence. Let's talk about adversity. Because if there's one ingredient that rewires your brain for real confidence, it's not praise, it's not success, it's struggle. When your nervous system is exposed to pressure, discomfort, or uncertainty, it responds with heightened arousal. That might show up as rapid heartbeat, shallow breath, tight muscles, or tunnel vision. These are signs of sympathetic activation, your body's way of preparing for threat. Most people interpret this response as a warning sign. I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong. But that interpretation is optional. The truth is the same biological response occurs in both fear and excitement. The difference isn't the chemistry, it's your narrative. And your narrative is trainable. Over time, with deliberate practice, your brain can begin to reinterpret stress not as danger, but as readiness. A cue that says, this matters. Focus up. But the only way to shift that narrative is through experience. Vital. No amount of journaling or thinking your way through will replace the transformation that occurs when you face a challenge and stay with it. Because in those moments, when you want to run, shut down, or escape, and instead you stay engaged, your brain receives new data. Data that says we can do hard things. And that data begins to overwrite the old reflex of self-doubt. Every confident person you admire has gone through this process, whether they know it or not. Not once, but repeatedly. They've stepped into rooms they didn't feel qualified to be in. Spoken words that felt too bold. Taken risks that carried real weight. And over time, their nervous system adjusted. The stress response didn't disappear, but it stopped being a stop sign. It became fuel. That's how neuroplasticity works. The more you expose your brain to a pattern, stress followed by successful navigation, the more it adapts. The stronger the circuit becomes. What once triggered paralysis now triggers presence. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. But here's the thing about neuroplasticity, it's not passive. It's earned. You don't become confident by reading about neuroscience. You become confident by applying it. By using your biology as a tool for transformation, one of the most powerful tools to accelerate this process is breath work. Because your breath is the fastest way to shift your physiological state. When you slow your exhale, even in moments of stress, you activate the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system, specifically through vagus nerve stimulation. This reduces heart rate, lowers cortisol levels, and reopens access to the prefrontal cortex. In other words, it brings your thinking brain back online. A simple protocol: inhale through the nose for 4 seconds, exhale through the mouth for 8. Repeat that cycle for 60 seconds. This 1-2 breathing ratio signals safety to the brain. It doesn't make the fear disappear, but it gives you enough space to choose your next action with clarity, not panic. Another underutilized tool is visual anchoring. When you're anxious, your eyes tend to dilate and dart, scanning for threat. But when you deliberately hold your gaze steady on a fixed point in your environment, your brain receives the message, we're not in danger. It's a bottom-up signal that recalibrates your autonomic state. Even posture matters. Standing tall with your shoulders back, absolutely vital. Chin neutral and feet planted evenly on the ground sends proprioceptive feedback to the brain that you are stable, that you are safe, that you can handle what's in front of you. These tools are not hacks. They are levers, ways to communicate with your own biology. Because if you wait for confidence to arise on its own, you may wait forever. But if you train it, if you deliberately use breath, gaze, posture, and micro behavior under tension, you create new neural architecture. You don't just feel confident, You become someone whose nervous system has learned calm under fire. It's also important to understand the role of reward prediction. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly forecasts outcomes based on past experience. If you failed publicly in the past, your brain tags similar situations as dangerous. That's not sabotage. That's learning. But just like it learned avoidance, it can learn pursuit. To change that prediction, you must update the evidence. And evidence comes from action every time you attempt something difficult and survive. Even if you stumble, your brain updates its model. The cost wasn't as high as expected. The threat wasn't fatal. You gain what's called confidence through calibration, a more accurate sense of your actual capability. This is why goal setting matters, not for ego, not for performance metrics, but because clearly defined goals create feedback loops. And feedback, whether positive or negative, is what allows the brain to improve its models. But here's where most people go wrong. They set goals that are too vague or too big. And when they don't immediately succeed, their brain registers the gap between expectation and reality as failure. That's demotivating. Instead, the key is micro goals. Tiny, defined steps that are just outside your comfort zone, but within reach. Why? Because completing small goals releases dopamine. And dopamine isn't just about feeling good. It increases focus, motivation, and effort output. It tells your brain that was worth it. Do more. This creates upward spirals of behavior. You don't build confidence by crushing huge goals once in a while. You build it by stacking wins. Daily, weekly, monthly, that your brain can actually register as success. This creates momentum. And momentum neurologically is the most powerful state for transformation. It's where effort begins to feel natural. Sleep, too, plays a critical role during deep sleep, particularly slow wave sleep. Your brain consolidates memory and rewires connections. The circuits you activated during the day are strengthened. The stress you experienced is processed, and your emotional threshold is reset. Without consistent sleep, your nervous system becomes fragile, reactive, and pessimistic. You cannot train confidence in a chronically depleted brain. And sunlight, especially morning light, helps anchor your circadian rhythm, which in turn regulates cortisol and dopamine timing. When you see sunlight within the first hour of waking, your brain gets the messaging it's daytime. Engage. This shifts your neurochemical profile into alertness, readiness, and action. That's the biological foundation of confidence. A brain that's alert, but not anxious. Energized, but not manic. Present, not distracted. Every one of these tools, breath, vision, posture, goal design, sleep, vital. Sunlight is a way of speaking your brain's native language, not through willpower, but through protocols, through structure, through behavior that says, we're safe, we're capable, we're learning. And when you consistently engage in these behaviors, especially under pressure, your brain starts to believe you, because confidence is not about convincing. It's about conditioning. You're not faking it. You're forming it one rep at a time. Confidence, when you strip it down, is not an emotion. It's a memory trace etched into your brain by experience, but not just any experience. It's built from the repetition of tension followed by triumph, struggle followed by some form of mastery. The nervous system keeps score. And every time you endure, every time you persist through something difficult, even when you don't win, your brain records a new line in the playbook: we showed up anyway. This matters because most people think confidence is a trait you're born with. It's not. Confidence is earned through what psychologists call self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to execute behaviors necessary to produce a desired outcome. And self-efficacy isn't wishful thinking. It's built on repetition, effort, and feedback. Let's take a closer look at how this feedback loop forms. When you attempt a task under pressure, your brain releases norepinephrine, an arousal molecule that increases alertness and attention. If the task is meaningful and you perceive even a small chance of success, dopamine is also released. Dopamine isn't about pleasure, it's about potential. It makes effort feel worthwhile. That cocktail of norepinephrine and dopamine lights up your midbrain and prefrontal cortex, creating a state of focused, motivated engagement. Now, if you follow through even imperfectly, your brain encodes that experience. And the next time you face a similar situation, your nervous system has a reference point. We've been here before. We can handle this. That's what builds confidence. Not affirmations, not hype. Reps. But this only works if you allow yourself to engage repeatedly, especially when it's hard. Confidence isn't what you feel before you act. It's what accumulates because you act. This is why stress, when handled correctly, is not your enemy. It's your gym, your training ground. But like any training, dosage matters. If you flood the nervous system with too much intensity too fast, you trigger shutdown. But just the right amount of challenge, that sweet spot of discomfort, activates adaptation. Neuroscientists call this the Goldilocks zone of neuroplasticity. Not too easy, not overwhelming, but just difficult enough to signal the brain, pay attention. This is how we grow. One way to access this zone consistently is through controlled exposure. Let's say you're afraid of public speaking. Instead of forcing yourself onto a stage in front of 300 people, start by recording a 60-second voice memo, then progress to a video, then to speaking to one friend, then to a group of 3. Each level of exposure teaches your brain that the threat it anticipated doesn't materialize, that it can survive visibility, that being seen isn't fatal. This process is called graduated exposure, and it's one of the most well-researched tools in behavioral science for reducing anxiety and increasing confidence, because it gives the nervous system time to adapt, and it builds real evidence. I did this. I survived. I can do more. The problem is, most people don't stick with this process long enough. They dabble in discomfort, then retreat when it gets awkward. But the brain doesn't rewire from dabbling. It rewires from deliberate, repeated exposure to the edge of your ability. That's the line where change happens, where resilience forms, where confidence takes root. And here's the nuance. It's not just what you do that matters. It's how you interpret what happens. If you attempt something difficult and then criticize yourself for not being perfect, your brain encodes the event as failure. But if you reflect with precision, what worked, what didn't, what you'll adjust, your brain tags the experience as a learning win. That framing is everything, because your confidence isn't based on perfection. It's based on your relationship with struggle. Struggle is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're engaging the circuits required for growth. This is what separates high performers from the rest, not talent, but their willingness to feel discomfort and keep going. And interpret that discomfort as progress, not proof of inadequacy. The most powerful confidence loop you can install in your nervous system is this discomfort, key action, key reflection, key adaptation. When that loop becomes familiar, your brain starts to crave challenge, because challenge equals growth. And growth feels good, not just psychologically, but neurochemically. You begin to associate difficulty with meaning, effort with identity. You're no longer avoiding stress, you're recruiting it, using it, training inside it. This is the biological foundation of what some call grit. And it's not a moral virtue, it's a neurological skill. It comes from exposure, recovery, and repetition. And yes, recovery matters just as much as exposure. Your nervous system isn't designed to stay in constant stress. To make confidence sustainable, you have to build in protocols that downshift you back into calm. This is where practices like non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, yoga nidra, and deep diaphragmatic breathing become crucial. They allow your body to return to baseline, to integrate what it learned, and to prepare for the next rep. Think of it this way: the gym doesn't build your muscles, it tears them. Recovery is where the growth happens. Same with your brain. The challenge opens the door to change, but the restoration locks it in. And the restoration isn't just physical, it's mental, it's emotional. It's the reflection that says, that was hard, and I did it anyway. That statement becomes part of your identity, not artificially, but biologically. Identity is not a fixed story. It's a set of predictions your brain makes about who you are based on the evidence it sees. Change the evidence, and you change the identity. Not with affirmations, not with hype, but with effort. That effort becomes self-respect. And self-respect is the bedrock of confidence. Because you can't trick your brain into believing you're capable, but you can train it to know you are. That training happens in the micro moments. The seconds when it would be easier to stay quiet when you speak, when it would be easier to freeze and you breathe, when it would be easier to avoid and you engage. Those moments accumulate. They become the internal proof your brain needs to believe in your capacity. And over time, something extraordinary happens. You stop asking, am I good enough? And start asking, what's the next challenge? Not because the fear is gone, but because you've built a nervous system that no longer treats fear as a full stop. That's the moment your brain starts operating from strength instead of protection, from growth instead of defense. And that shift, that's real confidence. If you want to understand confidence not as an abstract trait, but as a functional system, you have to look at the loop that governs how your brain learns, adapts, and encodes identity. It's simple, but not easy. Exposure, effort, recovery, integration. This loop runs not just in obvious moments, on a stage, in an interview, in a big decision, but in the quiet, daily experiences where you either teach your nervous system to expand or you train it to retreat. This is what people miss. Confidence isn't forged only in front of others. It's forged when no one's watching. When you go for a walk, even though your thoughts are heavy. When you say no, even when it feels uncomfortable. When you make the phone call you've been dreading. These are not small acts. They're biological votes, each one strengthening the neural pathways of agency, competence, and internal safety. When your nervous system gets used to you showing up for yourself in small moments, it starts to believe you'll show up when it counts. And belief, biologically, is not a concept. It's a neurochemical readiness, a state of internal alignment where what you intend and what you do are congruent. Confidence lives in that congruence. Now, this is not about forcing action at all costs. It's about listening to your nervous system, understanding what it's capable of today, and still choosing challenge in a way that's adaptive, not overwhelming. And this is where nervous system literacy becomes essential. Knowing the difference between fear that signals danger and fear that signals growth. Being able to track your own physiology, breath, tension, posture, heart rate variability, and using that data to make wise decisions about how to engage. Let's say you're about to take a risk. Maybe it's launching a business, having a difficult conversation, or pursuing something that matters deeply to you. If your breath is shallow, your vision is narrowing, your chest is tight, that's not weakness. That's information. Your sympathetic system is online. Now you have a choice. Override that signal, ignore it and plow through, or meet it, breathe with it, regulate it, make it your ally. Because here's the deeper truth. You don't need to eliminate fear to be confident. You need to train your brain to function while feeling fear. That is what separates temporary confidence from stable confidence. The former is reactive and conditional. It shows up only when everything is perfect. The latter is regulated and earned. It stays with you even in chaos. One of the most underused but powerful ways to train this kind of stability is through cold exposure. When you step into cold water, ice bath, cold shower, or even just uncomfortably cool water, your nervous system reacts instantly. Heart rate spikes. Breathing becomes rapid. Your brain interprets it as a physical stressor. But if you stay and regulate your breath, slow your exhale, and shift your focus, you are training your nervous system to maintain control under intensity. And that adaptation carries over. Your body doesn't know the difference between cold water and a difficult conversation. Stress is stress. So when you train regulation in one domain, the skills transfer. You're installing a new baseline of what your system can tolerate. That tolerance becomes strength. That strength becomes calm. That calm becomes confidence. Now imagine stacking this cold exposure in the morning, sunlight exposure within the first hour of waking to anchor circadian rhythm, breath regulation throughout the day, deep rest in the evening, and micro wins embedded in your workflow. You're not just trying to be confident. You're engineering a brain-body system that predicts success, regulates fear, and moves forward with clarity. This is not theoretical. It's biological. The brain is a pattern detection machine. It learns from what it repeatedly experiences. So if your daily experience is full of avoidance, hesitation, and second guessing, that becomes your nervous system's default setting. Not because you're weak, but because that's the map you've given it. But change the pattern, replace hesitation with movement, distraction with focus, comfort with challenge, and the system rewires. New circuits form. Confidence is no longer a leap of faith. It's a byproduct of evidence. Let's talk about the evidence. Your brain doesn't believe what you tell it. It believes what it sees you do. So every time you engage, your prefrontal cortex tracks the outcome. Did we follow through? Did we survive it? Did we learn? If yes, it stores that data for future action. If no, and especially if we retreat, it stores that too. This is why self-sabotage feels so personal, because your own brain records it as, we tried, we failed, let's not do that again. But here's the hopeful part. Failure in and of itself doesn't destroy confidence. Lack of integration does. What does that mean? It means if you stumble and then shame yourself, or suppress the lesson, or pretend it didn't happen, your brain stores the experience as unresolved threat. But if you reflect objectively, compassionately, and extract learning, your brain encodes it as progress. That's what builds adaptive confidence. Not success, but the capacity to metabolize failure. And the faster you reflect, the more efficiently your brain locks in the lesson. There's a window, roughly 24 hours post-experience, when the neurochemical signals are still active. That's the prime time for integrating new insights. Ask yourself, what did I do well? What would I do differently? What surprised me? These questions signal your prefrontal cortex to update internal models instead of defaulting to shutdown. Do this consistently and you build a brain that doesn't fear mistakes. It learns from them. And a brain that learns fearlessly is a brain that becomes confident not by avoiding risk, but by evolving through it. This is what we mean when we say confidence is a trainable trait, not by pretending, not by positive thinking alone, but by designing repeated exposures to small, tolerable stressors, tracking your physiological responses, using tools to regulate those responses, and building a personal library of integrated experiences. Over time, this doesn't just change how you act, it changes who you believe you are. That identity shift isn't a performance, it's a neurobiological update. Confidence becomes your default not because you decided it should be, but because your nervous system has practiced it into reality. And when that happens, the world around you starts to respond differently too, because people don't just hear your words, they feel your regulation, they sense your calm, your presence, your ability to remain grounded in intensity. That is the signal of true confidence, not dominance, not flash, but calm control rooted in real earned self-trust. That kind of presence is rare and it's magnetic, but it can't be faked. Your biology has to believe it. Your brain has to be wired for it. And the good news, it can be the most powerful realization you can come to is this confidence is not something you wait for. It's something you earn deliberately, repeatedly, biologically. You earn it by showing your nervous system that discomfort is not danger, that fear is not a command, that the signal of stress can be an invitation to grow, not a reason to retreat. And you do this not once, but over and over again until your brain stops interpreting effort as threat and starts seeing it as proof. This is how a resilient brain is formed. Not from comfort, not from safety, but from friction, followed by recovery, followed by reflection, followed by re-engagement. This cycle is how you train the nervous system to trust you. And trust in yourself, biologically speaking, is what confidence really is. That trust shows up in your tone, in your posture, in your ability to sit with intensity without being hijacked by it, in your ability to keep breathing when others hold their breath, in your ability to make decisions, not because you're certain, but because you've trained your nervous system to move even in uncertainty. That training isn't glamorous. It doesn't happen all at once. It's built in the dark, in silence, in early mornings when you go for a walk instead of staying in bed, in quiet decisions to speak the truth even when it shakes, in the breath you take before entering a difficult room, in the tension you lean into instead of avoiding. That's where confidence is carved deep in the fabric of your nervous system. And then the truth is the process never ends. You don't become confident once and for all. You become someone whose default is to face things. That's the difference. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It's the habit of forward motion with fear fully present. Your brain doesn't care how you feel about yourself. It cares what you do repeatedly. Action builds wiring. Wiring builds patterns. Patterns build identity. So if you want to feel confident, don't chase the emotion, chase the action. Show your brain over and over again what you're capable of. And that capability grows when you build resilience, not just once, but as a daily practice. The kind of resilience that comes from respecting your biology enough to train it, from working with your nervous system, not against it. Let's bring it down to one moment right now. You're watching this for a reason. Maybe you're tired of faking it. Maybe you've spent years waiting for confidence to appear. Maybe you've built the appearance of competence on the outside, but you still flinch in private. Maybe you've played small even when you knew you could play big because doubt pulled you back again and again. That's not weakness. That's biology doing its job, keeping you safe. But survival is not the same as fulfillment. And if you want to shift from surviving to thriving, you have to teach your brain a new way to predict the world. Not as a series of threats, but as a series of opportunities for mastery. That teaching starts with behavior. So here's your call to action. One thing, one protocol, one behavior you can start today, deliberate discomfort. Pick one thing every day that stretches your nervous system just slightly outside comfort without overwhelming it. It could be a cold shower, a difficult conversation, a moment of stillness in silence, a phone call you've been avoiding, A boundary you've been afraid to set, choose one. Then breathe into it. Regulate your body. Let your brain see that you can stay, feel, and move through. And then reflect. What happened in your body? What shifted in your breath? Where did the tension rise? And what did you do with it? That reflection closes the loop. That's what locks in learning. That's what tells the brain, this wasn't trauma, it was training. Do this once and you feel the edge. Do this for a week and you build familiarity. Do this for a month and you create new circuitry. Do this for a year and you won't recognize the person you were when you started. Not because the fear disappeared, but because it stopped owning you. And the world will notice, not because you're louder, not because you pretend, but because you carry the kind of calm that only comes from someone who has earned their own trust. That's real confidence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It doesn't need external approval. It moves forward quietly, steadily, with eyes wide open and breath in the body. It's not about being the best. It's about being available to challenge, to growth, to truth. And once your nervous system learns that you will not abandon it under pressure, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing confidence and start embodying it. And that changes everything.